Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first edition of the podcast. It is September 5th, 2017. This is the Free the People, Free Press podcast. I am by no means a professional radio host. I'm a man with a message that I'm trying to get out to the people. Simple as that. All right. Here we go. We're talking about taxes tonight. Sovereignty. What it means to be a real American. Alright, folks. My name's Alex. I'll be your host with you tonight for the Free the People, Free Press podcast. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm getting over a cold, so there might be times where there'll be a little coughing, a little scratchiness, a little nasal hearing, sounding business going on here. But this is serious business, so we got to get to business. September 5th, 2017. It's getting about that time of the year for a false flag. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about sovereignty. A lot of people can sit down and talk conspiracy theories, and yes, most of them are true. We're talking chemtrails, 9/11, essentially whatever you want to go, the gambit. We'll get to it. We're not gonna start there. More or less, we're looking. How do we beat these people? Well, we have to beat them legally. We have to use the Constitution. We have to use the only way we can and still be in the right, essentially. And when I say that, I don't mean we're just going to use the Constitution to beat these people who are bringing about the New World Order. What I'm saying is the Constitution is the right thing. It gives every man and woman on the earth freedom. My fault. Well, that's actually what it was designed to do. It was to give every man and woman on the earth freedom. It was to make kings toppled from their thrones by showing the rest of the world true freedom. That was the first New World Order. But the people, I'm not sure when it was decided, it was sometime in the 1800s, it was decided that the experiment had failed, as this country was supposed to be the new Atlantis. They weren't able to rule themselves, is what these Masons and members of the Brotherhood, the Order of the Quest, the secret societies, is what they decided. So that is why you're being enslaved right now. It was decided that man was in fact an animal, cattle, who could not rule himself. Therefore, he must be enslaved, and essentially anyone who is not of the faith of the New World Order, which, if you're not aware yet, is the mystery religion of Babylon, you will be exterminated, essentially. That's what's coming in order to what they believe. Now, this is what they believe, to ensure the human race survives. So we need to know who we are. Who are we? We are the people. We created the government. So we'll start with sovereignty. And just remember, no man is ever greater than the Creator. If you understand that statement, you can understand how the government works for you. The citizen's ultimate defense against any abusive agency of government is an exertion of the citizen's sovereignty or supremacy of authority. This brings the government back into their rightful position as, quote, public servants, unquote, of the citizens and protectors of our rights. The people are sovereign and subject only to God. The government owes its existence to the sovereign people who created it. The federal government has no authority beyond what the sovereign people have delegated it. Now remember that. Keep that in mind when you want free college. You have to understand what you're doing to yourself. You must understand that it doesn't work that way. There's no such thing as something for nothing. That's a fallacy. That's socialism. That's indoctrination. That's what you have been taught in your schools. It's a lie. The supreme sovereign is God. He is the creator of we the people and the endower of our rights. In the Declaration of Independence it says, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights," unquote. Quite possibly the most profound statement in the history of the world. Now you have to understand that we the people are the absolute sovereigns under God. Then we the people, the absolute sovereigns, we created the Constitution. Quote, "We the people of the United States do ordain and establish this Constitution, this Constitution, this Constitution." Not the Constitution from 1868. This Constitution for the United States of America. End quote. And then we have the Constitution for the United States of America. The Republic of the United States of America. Little u. Little u. Not a proper noun, but an adjective describing states. The supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, is the creator of the government. The Declaration of Independence says, quote, "To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from their just powers from the consent of the governed," end quote. What does that mean? That means that the government can only do what we allow it to do. So when you see the government doing what we're not allowing it to do, and it's unconstitutional, they have no right to be taking part in that activity at all. The Constitution also provides a separation of powers protection, which prohibits one branch of government from usurping the delegated responsibilities of the other branches of government. Next, we have the Bill of Rights, the protector of the people's God-endowed rights. Quote, Congress shall make no law, unquote. Quote, you have rights antecedent to all earthly governments, rights that cannot be repealed or restrained by human laws, rights derived from the grand legislator of the universe, end quote. That was said by John Adams. Now, we're not going to debate whether this grand legislator that he spoke about was the God of the Bible or the God of the mystery religion of Babylon, because it's not relevant in the case that the Constitution guarantees all men freedom. You must understand that if you want to have your religion, you also have to allow everyone else to have their religion. Webster's dictionary defines sovereign as, quote, having supreme rank, power and authority, supreme and independent power, indisputable, being above all others, having dominion, power, authority, rightful status of independence and prerogative, greatest in degree, end quote. For example, in England, the king is sovereign. The form of government that our founding fathers established for us to protect our freedom was a republic. Under a constitutional republic, the people are the absolute sovereigns. Webster's defines a republic as, quote, a state or nation in which the supreme power rests in the body of citizens, end quote. Our Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, states, quote, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, end quote. On September 3rd, 1783, after the Revolutionary War, a delegation led by Ben Franklin met in Paris and signed the, quote, Peace of Paris, end quote, commonly known as the Treaty of Paris. In that treaty, and its two addendums, signed by the kings of England, France, and Spain, the King of England ceded in his sovereignty in America to the people of American colonies and us to their prosperity. It is not reasonable to assume that these patriots who had fought and died in a revolutionary war to obtain their sovereign independence and to absolve themselves of the centralized power and jurisdiction of the English Parliament and Crown would shortly thereafter cede a comparable power and jurisdiction to a centralized federal government. These citizens had established a nation unique in all the world, free of governmental greed, power, interference, and restraint. They had created a nation where all men were equal to a king, and where the citizen had no power over him except God and conscience. A nation where happiness was a sacred right, and liberty, freedom, and independence were fundamental and unchangeable principles. Freedom, as defined by Webster's dictionary, is, quote, liberation from the control of some other person or arbitrary power, liberty, or independence. Independence is defined as, quote, controlling or governing oneself, or self-governing, end quote. The only purpose of government in the constitutional republic our founding fathers established was, according to the Declaration of Independence, quote, to protect the rights of the governed, unquote. According to the Supreme Court, United States versus Lee, quote, under our system who are there in England called subjects here the sovereign. Their rights, whether collective or individual, are not bound to give way to a sentiment of loyalty to the person of a monarch. The citizen here, or in America, knows no person, however near to those in power, or however powerful himself, to whom he need yield the rights which the law secures him. You understand that, folks? Are you understand that, folks? Sovereignty is essentially saying that you are equal to the king. And that's what it's supposed to be. That's what the Constitution was entitled to do. It was entitled to topple the kings off of all their thrones. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break here. And then we'll come back and we'll hit this some more. Alright, folks, this is Alex with Free the People Free Press Podcast. If you just tuned in, it's our first broadcast. We are speaking on sovereignty tonight. And we will continue, shall we? Quote, "Here, sovereignty rests with the people," end quote. Chisholm versus Georgia. Quote, "The words people of the United States and citizens are synonymous terms and mean the same thing. They both describe the political body who, according to our republican institutions, form the sovereignty. They are what we familiarly call the sovereign people, and every citizen is one of this people and a constituent member of the sovereignty." End quote. That was Wong Kim Ark quoting the Dred Scott versus Sanford case. "Sovereigns are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the King of England. Although titles of nobility are prohibited under the Constitution, the courts have ruled on numerous occasions that the people, as sovereigns, are entitled to all of the rights and prerogatives of a king." Quote, "People of a state are entitled to all rights which formerly belonged to the king, by his prerogative, end quote. Lansing versus Smith, 1829. And you have to understand, folks, unoverturned. Ooh, that's the cold right there. Sorry about that. If I just blew your ears out. Unoverturned decisions of the Supreme Court of the United States are a part of the law of the land for the sovereign citizens of the United States, even if such decision is over 200 years old. The word prerogative means, quote, exclusive right, a distinctly superior advantage, end quote. So let me read that to you again, quote, and then think about that statement now that I read the definition of prerogative. Quote, people of a state are entitled to all rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative, end quote. Interesting. So what that's saying is that we're born with an exclusive right. An exclusive right to what? To our unalienable God-given rights, which cannot be alienated to us, by us. They cannot be repealed or restrained. They cannot be given up. We can't give them up. We cannot contract ourselves to slavery. They are what keeps us free. The Constitution is put there then to defend those rights and to ensure that we do not lose them. However, in recent years, which the founders predicted, the people have been voting themselves into slavery. Now, we knew this was going to happen for a long time. And when I say we, I'm not including myself as a member of the mystery schools. That is absurd. What I'm saying is, we have been reading their writing and understand it. They will tell you it is no secret that they plan on using us to enslave ourselves, essentially by tempting us through propaganda and through the education system, which is very sick as that is itself. To continue. Quote, it is true that at English common law the duty of the Attorney General was to represent the king, he being the embodiment of the state, but under the democratic form of government now prevailing, the people are king. So the Attorney General's duties are to that sovereign rather than to the machinery of government, end quote. Hancock versus Terry, Elkhorn Mining Company. I'll read that again for you because I kind of stumbled through that, end quote. Quote, it is true that at common law the duty of the Attorney General was to represent the king, he being the embodiment of the state, but under the democratic form of government now prevailing, the people are king. So the Attorney General's duties are to that sovereign rather than to the machinery of government, end quote. A sovereign is answerable only to God and his own conscience, being what? Being that you never violate the unalienable rights of another. The common law is very simple, folks. There has to be a victim. If there is no victim, there is no crime. Do you understand? Is it starting to make sense to you? I know all of this sounds odd to you, but you have to understand that we have to be the watchdogs of the government. We cannot allow the chicanery to continue. We are losing our rights, folks, on a daily basis. Oregon just passed, I believe it was, I don't want to give out false information here because that will make me part of the problem. But I believe it was Senate Bill 719, taking effect January 1st, 2018. This bill makes it legal, essentially, to confiscate firearms through a petition put out by a family member and or court official, I believe police officers, and I'm sure court officials as well, without even having you defend your rights. They can just vote on it as long as someone makes this plea, and if they find that it's valid, they can legally take your guns now. Not now. That's 2018, starting in Oregon. Now, hopefully, the Oregon militia understands what this means, and they, do what has to be done. Obviously, with the occupying of federal buildings, I'll be honest, I don't know those guys personally, so I can't say whether they are not provocateurs per se. They're not imposters trying to look like us. I don't know them. I want to believe they have good intentions. I can't say that for certain, though. I mean, and that's how it is, folks. You have to be wary about everyone. Don't believe a word I'm saying, but you have to listen to it. You can't believe a word of it. You have to listen to it. You have to research it. You have to make sure that everyone's telling you the truth. And if you don't, you're just going to be a puppet on their string. So, essentially, they've admitted now geoengineering, or for the masses, what they call chemtrails. They've done it by saying that global warming is actually going to be stopped by blocking out the sun and polluting the atmosphere with all kinds of chemicals that kill our brains and our lungs and our cognitive function. And I'm sure more than that. I'm not a scientist. All I can do is read, some MSDSs and say, okay, aluminum is not good for your brain. It gives you Alzheimer's. There's plenty more smarter people than me, and they're the ones who need to be woken up because they don't know that they're a part of our movement yet, but we need them. We need intelligence. We need everybody. We need people to wake up. It's time to wake up. What was I getting with that? With the chemtrails, though? We got the chemtrails, we got the people. I'm having a nice glass of fluoride right now. It's nice and cold. Tastes like it's fresh fluoride, it's real good. It's good stuff. But kind of got off track there. Quote, "It has been justly thought a matter of importance to determine from what source the United States derives its authority. The question here is proposed whether our bond of union is a compact entered into by the states, or whether the Constitution is an organic law established by the people. To answer this, we, quote, we the people, ordain and establish this Constitution," end quote. So are you understanding now, folks? It is the supreme law of the land. However, they've used loopholes where they're claiming that the United Nations Treaty is the supreme law of the land now. That's not essentially public, but that's what they justify to themselves their policies with. It was the Constitution of 1868, but at this point it's the United Nations Treaty, but, it's not about that. What it's about is about restoring our Constitution, because them using the United Nations Treaty is treason. We'll continue here. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I went off on a tangent again. Quote, "It has been justly thought a matter of importance to determine from what source the United States derives its authority. The question here proposed is whether our bond of a union is a compact entered into by the states, or whether the Constitution is an organic law established by the people. To answer this, we, quote, we the people ordain and establish this Constitution," end quote. The government of the state had only delegated power from the people, and even if they had an inclination, they had no authority to transfer the authority of the sovereign people. Let me read that for you again. They had no authority to transfer the authority of the sovereign people. The people, in their capacity as sovereigns, made and adopted the Constitution and made it binding the states' governments without the states' consent. It binds the states' government without the states' consent. The people, in their capacity as sovereigns, made and adopted the Constitution. The United States as a whole, therefore, emanates from the people and not from the states. And the Constitution and the laws of the states, whether made before or since the adoption of that Constitution of the United States, are subordinate to the United States Constitution and the laws made in pursuance of it, end quote. And that comes from Bouvier's 14th edition Law Dictionary. Good night, folks.